Dave Hollis, so welcome to Foot Traffic. I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Stacy, for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. So as we are, airing this right now, you have a new book that is out called Get Out of Your Own Way, A Skeptic's Guide to Growth and Fulfillment. And I'm excited to dive into that topic two ways. I'm excited for us to talk about getting out of your own way, but then there's a whole other aspect that I'm excited to talk about is what if we're maybe married to a skeptic? I have a lot of female entrepreneurs who are these go-getters and achievers, but maybe they're on a different page as their husband and their spouse. So I'm excited to dive in a couple different ways with you today.
All the things. Come on.
All the things. All right. So first, what made you write the book? Was this something you've been thinking about for a while? Give us the details.
I was never, ever one to think that I was going to write a book. I received the first draft copy of a book that my wife wrote called not called Get Out of Your Own Way, called Girl Wash Your Face. And it freaked me out. I just panicked completely because of how honest and transparent she was deciding to be about the way that she had struggled in her life. And I did everything I could to try and talk her out of releasing that darn book. And thank goodness she didn't listen because, man, I was able to, in it coming out, see the power of people seeing themselves in her stories. And so when I was witness to the way that people were able to approach transformation in their life or their business because of some of the honesty that she had represented and some of the tools that she had used to get out of her own way, I asked, hey, I am unbelievably differently wired than my wife. Is there maybe something to my experience in my own struggle that if I were to, in the same way that she did, own the things that I've had to work through, that it might be a tool that people could also see themselves in my stories and in learning a little bit of how I had to get out of my own way, keep themselves out of their own. And thus began the journey of writing a book. One of the hardest things that, frankly, I've ever done in my entire life, but also because of how hard it was, one of the things I'm proudest of in my entire life.
Yeah, they always say, which you're not going to be able to relate to this, but they say that writing a book is like giving birth. It's like the pregnancy journey and all of that. And honestly, I feel like giving birth may have been easier than writing my first book.
Yeah, what's interesting is I knew that I needed to do it in a similar way to how she did it, in just like really owning all of the things that I'd been in and through. And that meant like, hey, if there was a story where I had shame for a way that I didn't show up as well as I could have for my life, go ahead and put that in the book, which is theoretically very simple and practically very difficult. And so this book writing exercise became a little bit of therapy and some catharsis in just working through a whole host of things. But also, there were parts of it that wrote itself as I was in the midst of writing it, because the process of writing a book, it turns out, is a super trigger for a whole host of things that I was also trying to figure out in real time as we were trying to scale this business and do this work together.
Yeah. What was it like back when you were a skeptic to personal growth and all of that? Can you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I was introduced to many of the things that I now regularly consume, that we are doing every day as a part of our work, by my wife, who, in the midst of her trying to figure out how to overcome some of the stuff that she was processing in her life, realized that, there are tools that will actually help you do some of this part of your life better. She was struggling really badly with anxiety at the time. And when she went on a journey to understand where anxiety comes from and how to potentially process it better, it changed the way that she was able to see tools as a thing you could apply to a problem and actually become stronger or reframe something in your mindset or think differently about your ability to persevere. And so she just went full hog into this world. And I, in the midst of her going into that world, was descending into a ditch of my own creation in somewhat of a midlife crisis moment. And so I was incredulous to much of what she was doing, in part because of just some natural wiring, whether it was through the lens of my family of origin and how they taught me certain things, the masculinity that I was raised in when it comes to men owning their struggle and how to become comfortable asking for help. But for whatever reason, I was somewhat resistant. And as she was continuing to get better, as I was not, I started to resent some of what I had previously been skeptical of, until finally, after I watched how much it was working for her, I became curious.
Okay.
And so, if you are listening and you're in a partnership with someone and you're like, man, I am all in on this. How do I convince my partner to get on board? You cannot convince your partner to get on board. Number one, you need to release yourself from the burden of attempting to convince someone to want to show up well for their life or reach for growth. The best thing that you could possibly do is show up well for yourself. And in the work that you're doing and the tools that you're using, give practical examples of the power of the use of those tools in a way that provokes curiosity. It's like the movie Inception. It has to be their idea.
Yes.
And so the more that you can model what it might mean to read the books or go to the conferences or move your body or whatever it might be, the more likely you are to provoke a curiosity that makes it their idea and starts their journey. Because if it's not their journey, they ain't going anywhere.
I agree with you. I have been an entrepreneur for 18 years. My husband has been on the Milwaukee SWAT team. And I have been trying to convince him to quit for many, many years and come work with me. And I finally just gave up. I'm like, this isn't, we're just going to let it ride. He's going to retire in 14 years. And all of a sudden last June, I stopped pushing. And last June, he's like, I think I want to retire.
Awesome.
Second I let go of it, it became his idea. And I think and I feel better that it's his idea and not me pushing it so much. So I think you're right. We can't push it. We just have to continue doing what we're doing, be supportive of them, and let them figure out what they want to do and how that looks. So thank you.
Yeah, I will say too, I think it's interesting because as much as I was curious because of the progress that Rachel was making in her own journey, the tools that she used and the value she got from the individual tools apply differently to me than they did her. And so your journey may in fact be the trail of breadcrumbs that leads someone to that curious moment that changes the way they think about reaching or doing. But there isn't maybe going to be a one-size-fits-all approach to growth generally. I ended up going into this with a lot of skepticism because she has always been more a believer to my skepticism. I've got a fixed mindset historically to her always having had more of a growth mindset. And motivationally speaking, she has been way more intrinsically internally motivated to me being more extrinsically motivated. And so the tools that I needed and the process I had to work through was just completely different. And so if you end up, because of your model, getting somebody that you care about to get on board, then don't be particular about how they get on board. Just encourage them to find a way to reach for tools in whatever way that shows up for them on their journey.
When you kind of started to transition over into being curious and checking this out, what was the first thing that you, like a first mentor or somebody that you looked at, do you remember?
Yeah, well, the first step for me, I am a pragmatic, practically wired human being. And so I wanted to get to the bottom of why. Why do I think this way? Why do I act this way? And the answers to why for me started availing themselves to me on the couch in a therapist's office. A thing that, again, I said, I will never go to therapy. Therapy is for certain kinds of people. I'm not those people. And then I went because of this interest in just understanding a little bit of the storytelling that I was believing and where those stories originated from. And man, what a gift. It was amazing. And because now I had a little bit of an answer key behind why I was doing what I was doing or why I was thinking what I was thinking, it led me into other spaces where I could now explore more. And so after I started my journey in therapy, I understood that mindset was a big part of it. And so Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, was one of the first things that I read because I really wanted to understand this difference between how I'd historically been more fixed to Rachel being more growth. Charles Duhigg's Power of Habit was something that I dove into and really started to appreciate the science of habits because man, so much of what I was doing and so much of what any of you who are listening are doing is just unconscious reflex. The way that you may have responded previously to this stimulus that has presented itself previously is the way that you're responding in real time, whether you know it or don't know it. And the more that you can be conscientious of that fact, the more that you can preempt how you will respond when your triggers show up. And so, and then it just, continued to build from there, snowballed from there, right? A thing I said I'd never do, sitting in a personal development conference. I was then a begrudging, willing participant, and man, had just so many awesome breakthroughs in environments like that, where I was thinking about things through different lenses for the first time and able to see things because of that for the first time in a way that, man, changed the way I think about basically everything.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I asked you who, because everybody's going to have a different person they resonate with or a person they can learn from really well. And that was the one thing I wanted to do when my husband started to come into this business, was I wanted to have him find somebody he enjoyed and he liked listening to. He's probably not going to, no offense, listen to Rachel Hollis. Like it's probably not going to be his cup of tea. But I was trying to like show him, and I actually took him to Russell Brunson's event because I wanted him to see like a guy doing this and what this looked like. It was a really great experience. So I will
tell you this: the one thing that has been the most bizarre and most beautiful gift of the experience of the last couple of years are the people that were mentors that had no idea who we were. We were reading their books and listening to their podcasts, who have bizarrely become acquaintances and now in some instances friends. And Russell and his wife have become friends. Tom Bilyeu and his wife Lisa have become friends. John Maxwell has become a friend. And in becoming closer friends now with these people who have had experiences, sometimes in scaling a business, sometimes in processing the emotions of the business, they're able to, in coming alongside, normalize so many of the things that we are experiencing for the first time as we're hitting certain thresholds of the company going up in number of people, or the way that we're trying new things on different platforms. How working together for the first time has been the best and hardest decision we could have possibly ever made. And just having people normalize the things that entrepreneurs and small business owners inevitably have to go through has been such a gift for the work that they do or the words that they're able to speak into our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important to be surrounding yourself so they can say, this is normal. This is not a big deal. You're going to be fine. If you didn't experience this, I would be worried for you, right? So it's great that you guys are able to continue to connect with those people.
We were having, Rachel was speaking at something with John Maxwell not terribly long ago. And I was still like trying to unlearn a little of the muscle memory of having spent 20 plus years inside of traditional entertainment business. The last 17 was at Disney, a big conglomerate environment, and things working there the way they do don't have application necessarily in the way that our small business runs. And I was complaining, for lack of a better word. I was struggling a little bit with how problems seemed to be happening at a frequency that I was uncomfortable with and certainly unfamiliar with. And he said, hey, running a small business, Dave, ends up having a fact, and that is that a leader is never going to have 2 good days in a row. And so you have to choose, do you want to have multiple good days in a row, or do you want to run a small business? Because the price of entry in running a small business is just coming to terms with this reality that you're probably not going to have many good days in a row. So, well, thank you for the permission to normalize this experience that I am now becoming accustomed to, that I just wasn't in my old world. Having someone tell you that it's okay, or represents how your business growing is about stacking failure and not so much stacking success.
Yeah.
What a gift. Changed the way I think about everything.
Yeah. So what are a few ways, and I'm sure you share a ton of stories in the book, but what are some ways that you were in your own way? Like what stories came up for you as you were looking back?
Well, I mean, I think it's important just to start with the idea of stories generally as a thing that get in our way, because the book is actually just 20 stories or lies that I believe, that in believing them kept me from being the best version of myself. Stories also known in personal development parlance as limiting beliefs. I don't even like to use the word because the skeptic in me wants to kind of gag on it. But you have, listener, you have limiting beliefs, things that you believe that limits what you believe you are capable of or what you can achieve. And I, like anybody else, believe certain things. And so you have to start by really doing a little bit of looking into what it is that you do believe in terms of stories and where those stories came from. And, sometimes it's some big framework, big idea type stuff like gender roles or masculinity or femininity as it's like defined generally in society. Sometimes it's your family of origin. It may be, someone that you love or crave love from, whatever it might be. But as you believe a story and that story in any way keeps you from believing what you ought to believe to fully chase your dream, to fully scale your business, you have to ask if that's a story worth believing. And so for me, many of these stories, I had to go back to the author of the story. Where did the story come from? Yeah. And does that author have credibility in my life? And one of the stories I tell, it's not a business example necessarily, but man, you can plop a business example in here as an analogy. I was told that as a person who is tall, that I couldn't run. Running has become something that is very, very important in my life, but I did not run a mile until I was 36 years old because I'd been told that tall people can't run. Wow. And so this chapter of the book is a lie that some things are available to other people that are not available to me. And so I had to ask, who was the author of this story? And my mother, she's an amazing human being. She has credibility in my life. She told me this truth through the lens of her fear, right? She was worried for me, and that worry manifests itself wrapped in a bow of love. Hey, Dave, don't hurt your back, don't hurt your knees, don't hurt your hips. Okay. And so I took that as gospel truth, capital T, absolute truth in my life until I was 36, and I started running. And I didn't hurt myself. My back, my hips, my knees, they were fine. So I had to test the hypothesis of my truth rather than take hers. And as I started running, man, I've just become a runner. Now, the thing that's important in this story is my mother, though she's great and has credibility in my life, is neither tall nor a runner. Right? So does she have credibility on the topic of tall people running? The answer is no. Be free. And so as you're thinking about your business, as you're thinking about, sometimes it's like you're in business, you're in a relationship with a partner, you have a mother-in-law, there's someone on the outside who is storytelling about what they believe your ability to do this work is, and you've taken some of their storytelling and made it your truth without testing your own hypothesis. And so I want to encourage you, if there are certain things that you believe about your capacity to lead in crisis, here we are, we're sitting in quarantine. It is harder today, right this second, than ever before. If there's a story that you are believing right now about your inability to pivot, inability to innovate, inability to think differently and make it through this, because man, this is a thing, where does that story come from? It doesn't mean dismiss the facts. It doesn't mean create a rose-colored glasses fairy tale version of what's happening. It's, can you draw on every experience in your history where you were able to persevere through something that was impossibly bigger than you thought you could handle and came out the other side stronger for having made it through? Connect to that story, make that your truth, and let go of the stories of whoever might be doubting you, or even if that doubting might be a voice inside of your head that's more a reflection of some insecurity from fifth grade than it is your ability to drive this business in 2020.
Yeah. And I think now more than ever, as we're going through COVID-19, we all have these stories popping up into our heads right now. And whether we're acting or not taking action because of those stories could be detrimental to our business. So I think now is a big opportunity to look and kind of get real with ourselves and see, do you have a suggestion for understanding that it's a story? Because it's such a story that it's like a fact in some people's minds. Like, how do you recognize that this is a story and not a truth?
Well, I had to get to a place of understanding what was keeping me from who I'd hoped to be, right? So I went through this exercise at the beginning of the year where I made this wild declaration: 2020 is going to be the best year of my life. I have waited until I was 45 years old to have the best year of my life. I've had plenty of great years, so the bar is high. But in starting this conversation, I wanted to understand where in the past I had experienced pain so that I could, in wanting to have my best year ever, avoid pain. And every time in the last 3-5 years where pain showed up, it was where there was this discrepancy between who I hoped to be and who I knew myself to actually be showing up as when I was by myself, right? So how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself is everything. Yeah. And the experience of pain when I was by myself usually was connected to me knowing that there was this discrepancy, inconsistency, incongruence between who I want to be and who I showed up as. And that space is shame, it's regret, it's underfulfilled potential, it's letting the worry of other people gate me from actually achieving the things I know I can achieve.
Yeah.
And closing that gap becomes my every single day mission through the habits and routines that I put into play, through questioning the stories that I'm believing, through, on and on and on.
Yeah.
But the storytelling in like, what would it take to close the gap starts with you understanding who you'd actually like to be and how you're actually showing up. And as you can see the space in between the two, in that space is where the stories that limit you live. Now start picking apart, pulling on the threads of the things that you say, man, if I could just change the way I think about my ability to learn new things, my ability to persevere through, uncertain times, my ability to lead a team inside of my ability, you're a brick and mortar retailer inside of a time where people can't walk into a brick and mortar store. Okay. If you have some limiting belief around your ability to create value for your customers in an environment where they can't shop in your store, where does that come from? And how can you change your limiting belief into an empowering belief? No. I can absolutely still serve that person who has loyalty from my brand by changing the way that I serve them in X, Y, and Z kind of way. In real time, I'll give you an example. We have a business that has live events as a big part of what we do, right?
Yes.
Rachel Hollis jumping up and down on stage for 3 consecutive days to 10,000 women is a thing. And it, as a driver of revenue for our company of 60 people, is a big thing. And so as we start this quarantine and are asking questions around cash flow, we had to ask, all right, are we going to wait this out and just hope that it happens to end soon enough that we don't have to let anyone go, that we can sustain this without a big part of our revenue? Or do we have to think about doing things that we said we would never, ever do? And the answer, of course, was the latter.
Yeah.
We introduced a digital conference. We found a way to bring great speakers together. We stayed focused on our primary thing, which was serving the needs of the audience and finding a way to meet them where they are. And so if you've got something inside of your business that has traditionally relied on people walking into a door that has a closed open sign that you flip over during certain hours, you need to be, if you're not already, and I'm sure that most of you are, asking, what are the things we said we'd never do?
Yeah.
What are the things that normally we wouldn't even consider, but now, because of the air cover of this totally unprecedented thing that we're all experiencing, you get to now try something in an environment where you can't make a mistake. I mean, you'll make mistakes.
Yeah.
But the only mistake that you could make in an environment like this is not trying new things, because the old playbook, the thing that worked 7 weeks ago, that old playbook is as relevant as your VCR. You need to throw the old playbook out and start creating plays that are considerate of the game that we are sitting inside of right now. This game is so different than it was 2 months ago.
Yeah. And I mean, what we're seeing in our businesses and with a lot of our clients is the opportunity for growth, the opportunity to assess what maybe some of your weaknesses now are exposed and how can you diversify and not put all your eggs in one basket. I am sure you guys have seen that too, as you're pivoting and making these decisions. I've said to a few people, like 5 years from now, when we are marveling at what has been built in our company, so many foundational pieces of what exists as the reason why our company has become what it has will have traces back to 2020 of these things that we are implementing in real time being a complicit part of why we were able to build what we have built. The dependency that we previously had on a great product management tool like Asana or a great communications tool like Zoom or Slack is nothing compared to what it is today. Trying to keep 60 virtual human beings totally connected, totally on task, totally accountable, it is going to create people being accountable and managed from a project perspective in the future once things return to whatever the new normal ends up looking like in a way that will be so for our business. But not only that, even just the example of this live conference, because it wasn't a thing that we said we would do, and now it's something we are doing, and the kind of value it's going to bring when we do add the live component back in, the in-person component back in, this digital experience becomes an incremental revenue stream and an incremental value driver. That this is what is like lemonade is one way of looking at it. Oh, we got lemons, let's make lemonade. No.
We're making a variety of designer lemonades that are going to transform the way
Yeah.
that we do business when designer lemonade becomes a part of what it is to do business with us 5 years from now.
Yeah. I think 2020 is the year that kind of got everybody up to date. It's like, welcome to a completely new generation right now. I mean, that's what's happened. And I agree with you. I think there are things that we are having to pivot. I'm in a business where I've been in it for 15 plus years. I've been comfortable for a long time, not making a lot of changes. And all of a sudden, it was time for us to get innovative. And some of these ideas are here to stay. So that's exciting to see what can come out of a time like this that doesn't feel like an opportunity when it's first happening.
Yeah. I mean, definitely there was a time at the very beginning of this where people were almost in disbelief, almost in like the similar cycles to grief. There was a little bit of denial of what was even happening. And those then that were able to process and grieve what was and appreciate what is and start making decisions, acknowledging that things are different. Those are the people that are already in a place where there is less anxiety, there is more certainty because there is some decisiveness in the leading and the new planning that is happening. If you are someone who is hearing this and you're like, I still am holding out hope that we're just going to come out of this in no time, I can weather the storm until we get there, respectfully. And yet, guess what? You are entitled 100% to taking that perspective. Respectfully, I don't know that that is a great plan. Yeah. Because there is a part of us in how we are trying to proactively think about how this thing is here. I think it's going to be here for a lot longer than anyone wants to necessarily acknowledge. Yes. And when things are reopened and when life goes back to quote unquote normal, it's going to be a different kind of normal, and it's going to take a longer time for it to feel like it used to feel. So you can't wait and hope, because that just isn't the kind of strategy that's going to ultimately bring you through this stronger. This is that time to really think about what really matters, what really doesn't matter, and are there chances that previously you never ever would have taken that now, because of this being a time to experiment a little and meet consumers in a new spot, give you the freedom to do it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think our consumers are a lot more forgiving with us jumping fast and acting. They're not expecting us to have all the answers. So it's easier to experiment now than when things get back to normal and you're trying new things.
Yeah, I do a coaching on the career side, and I've got people that are often inside of traditional businesses. I run a hair salon. I've got a kickboxing studio, and to a person, I'm asking the same question that I would ask anyone listening right now, and that is, you have a customer who is depending on a value exchange. They are interested in you serving their needs, and their needs in some ways are consistent, right? They still don't want to have roots. They still would like to stay fit, but their ability to address those needs in the same way that they previously did have wildly changed. And so your challenge as a business operator is to still meet the needs. These needs have not changed in a new way. And so it comes down to creativity, innovation, and your willingness to understand where they can be met and find a way to meet them. And some of it, by the way, right, we've just kicked off a community challenge that doesn't cost any money, right? So we understand there is a need in this community of people that we hang out with on an every single day basis. If we were to create 14 weeks of content, we call it the next 90 days, and just serve them, just serve the need to reduce anxiety, serve the need to reduce their fear, arm them with some of the tools to be stronger leaders, to work on their perspective. Would there potentially, on the other side of this, be even more community as things come back to normal, that when we then ask, hey, do you want to have a more immersive experience inside of our digital education platform, inside of a live event in person, the answer is going to be yes.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So if you're running a brick and mortar store, if you're running a salon, if you're running a kickboxing studio, maintaining that relationship in the midst of this will not only engender you to potentially have them return to your store when it's over, but if you and when you do it well, it may in fact activate them as a best guest, as a fantastic customer, because of the way you were able to not only be there for them, but alleviate some of the things that were creating pain or problems in their life during unprecedented times.
Yeah. Dave, this has been phenomenal. Thank you for your time. Where can everybody go find your book and find you online?
Well, the book is available everywhere, anywhere. So check it out. If you want to hear me read the darn thing, I'll read the whole thing to you on Audible, but it's available at Target, on Amazon, everywhere and anywhere. All the stuff that Rachel and I are doing every day lives at thehollisco.com. So if you're interested in joining our free challenge, by all means, next 90 days is what it's called. Hit up thehollisco.com and check it out. If you're interested in hanging out with us at a very cool live conference on May 2nd, we have something called Rise Live. We'd love to have you there. Not very expensive tickets, killer lineup of speakers, but everything's on thehollisco.com.
Amazing. Again, thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate your time, and congrats on the amazing best-selling book. I'm so happy for you guys.
Thank you, Stacey. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me today.